Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off with Joint Chiefs of Staff head, Chairman General Mark Milley. His statement, and I guess it shows the time that we live in politically, that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has to remind us that the military is not an option in deciding our elections. He said, I believe deeply in the principle of an apolitical U.S. military. I think that ship has sailed. He goes, in the event of a dispute over some aspect of the elections, by law, U.S. courts and the U.S. Congress are required to resolve any disputes, not the U.S. military. He says, I foresee no role for the U.S. armed forces in this process. Because there are some saying if Trump decides he's not going to leave, that, we're going to go in there, military's going to drag him out. I'm going, no, I'm kind of with, I would love to see an apolitical military. I would love to see the military not a branch of the what was formerly known as the Republican Party and now the Trump Party. That Trump, the head of a military that is loyal to him, is kind of a scary thing. Seriously. Also, the big news that I woke up to: Rand Paul evidently claimed that he was accosted after the big COVID spreader speech last night in Washington. And I guess it just shows how far Republicans are willing to go at this point. And I give him credit. I give Rand Paul credit. Look, he lives next door to a guy who beat the crap out of him and broke his ribs. So, walking into a protest with his wife, I guess not too far to get some attention. And this is what this really was. Rand Paul walking into the middle of the protest last night was simply him looking for trouble. He came out today and said, well, if it wouldn't been for the police, thank goodness for our police, the angry, vicious mob would have torn me apart. They would have killed me. No, they weren't. I mean, this is the kind of hyperbole that you get from the radical right. And I gotta believe that this was a directive from the White House. This was, hey, Rand, we need you to go out and stir up some trouble. And to the protesters' credit, to their credit, nothing happened. The video that's out there that shows him being bumped, if anybody's been in a large crowd, and look, I'm a pretty big guy. I have been in crowds where I think of Barack Obama's first inaugural day that year, where I had my daughter on my shoulders because she couldn't walk because the crowd would have crushed her. That's how many people were in the streets. And I'm a pretty big guy. There were moments where I felt that I was completely off the ground being carried by the crowd, because that massive wave of humanity was just, there was no fighting that. So to see the little bump that happened, that's not being accosted. That's not being attacked. That's not being ripped to shreds. What that is somebody who's looking for attention. And look, the right-wing media gave Rand Paul all the attention he wanted, stoked his ego of how brave he was to go and get out there and, mix it up with the protesters. Why did he hide behind his wife? Here's the thing. This is one of those moments where I'll do some dumb stuff. I've put myself in positions where you go, boy, that was stupid. I would never put my wife in that position. I would never put my kids in that position. If I'm dumb enough to do it, I should be the one that suffers the beating. But here you've got this situation where Rand Paul, decides, hey, I'm going to take my wife out into this crowd that's angry. And my presence can only inflame that even more. And this is the amazing thing about the moment that we're in, because you've got a political party who is hell-bent on making bad situations even worse. It's all about stoking the fears of the others. And, as I watched Trump's speech last night, and again, I had to watch it in bits and pieces afterwards because I was here, obviously. It made me come to this moment where Trump and the Republicans really, and I've said this before, but it's really front and center that they prey on ignorance. They prey on our not knowing the other. I actually had someone yesterday tell me that the reason they were going to vote for Donald Trump is because our cities are literally burning and there's mass chaos in all of those Democrat cities and we need law and order. And I've been hearing this stuff for years, how unsafe our cities are and how the others have taken over. And look, I've been to a lot of major cities. They're not burning. There's not mass chaos. There are people who they love their families just as much as people who live in the rural areas do. They want the same things: safe neighborhoods, good schools, good jobs, a future, not having to worry about a president who's going to, cause more tension and chaos. Are there some spasms across our country? Yes. But our cities are not burning. Are there a couple of little things going on? Yes. And if we had good leadership, if we had someone who, wanted to unite the country and not keep us divided and only saw his way towards re-election as stoking the fears of the suburbs and the rural areas against those others, maybe we wouldn't have these problems. Because all we heard last night from Trump was how bad Joe Biden is. In fact, oddly enough, I think Joe Biden was the word spoken most often in his speech. I think he brought up Biden's name 44 times during his speech. I mean, that's pretty remarkable considering Biden didn't bring his name up once. Talked about moving the country forward, talked about policies that were going to help families, talked about a positive future. What we got from Trump was, be afraid. Joe Biden's weak. He's taking marching orders from the liberal hypocrites. Biden is going to surrender to the virus. He actually said that. I mean, you can't make this up. He went on about mob rule and cancel culture and the radical left. And it was predictable because understand, all Trump has is that. All he has is our ignorance of the others. All he has is to continue to inflame those divides. And that's what we saw last night. And I got to tell you, the speech was well written. Whoever did it. If your goal was to rip us apart even further and to solidify your base while attacking your opponent, the guy who wrote the speech did it really well. I thought his delivery was poor. I thought he was a little off his game, but that could be because the 1,500 or 2,000 people who were sitting there basically maskless, they weren't the rabid Trump crowd. They weren't the ones who were, whatever you say, Donnie. They weren't that. They weren't the ones, painting their face with, MAGA signs. I do find it interesting, however, and this is one of those asides, that the applause that the people on the South Lawn gave was greater for, we're going to save the Second Amendment than it was for ensuring that people get health care. That was one of those little interesting moments. You go, whoa, I guess we know where your priorities are. We're going to gun you down, but we're not going to help you on the other side. It's just crazy. But here's the thing. I mean, you look at this event last night, and I'm uncomfortable with the president using the backdrop of the White House. And to be honest, purely from this, from an imagery standpoint, especially if you're looking at dictators, wow. Putin had to be gone. Yeah, that was pretty good. Nice job. People like Hussein would have gone, yeah, I would have done that. Had the whole family up there, had the whole cabal, with the backdrop of our White House. It was really a very, very imagery wise, was incredible. The people who put it together, good on them. They did a great job. And they're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. But again, for me, it shows that this president, there is nothing that he won't step on and crush. There is no policy. There is no precedence. There is no historical standing. There's nothing that he won't go after. And I think Ivanka was right. He has changed Washington. And not for the better. I mean, I know we're going to drain the swamp. Yeah, and they filled it with really ugly, much uglier monsters than were there before. The difference is now we know them. We know the ugly monsters. And the people who are supposed to be keeping them in check don't care. I mean, it's quite amazing. Now, I got to be honest. I was happy to see the ratings. I think some of us have tuned away. I didn't watch all of it. I watched, parts of it, but I read the speech. His ratings were down, and that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt our TV president. Joe Biden's acceptance speech drew a little over 2 million more viewers than did Trump's little spiel. I found it interesting that Chris Wallace, who evidently took a beating today on right-wing social media, said that he thought that the Trump speech was surprisingly flat, which I thought was a good assessment because he was sweating profusely. It was hot out, but it was one of those moments where he just little low energy, and it's odd that he goes after Sleepy Joe, and it was a late night speech. Look, the guy's up past his bedtime. I get that. But according to the Fox News people, you didn't quite have the same bite. And as I said a moment ago, I think the reality is you didn't have the adoring crowd, and he didn't go much off script. That also, when he gets his energy, he gets off on these wild tangents where facts and truth and anything doesn't matter. Whatever pops out of his mouth is where he goes. Now, for me, what's going to be interesting is in the coming days, how many of the people who showed up, how many of those folks are going to test positive for the coronavirus? Because already, day one, the Charlotte portion of the convention, day one, we've already got 4 people who have tested positive from Charlotte, 2 attendees and 2 support staff. Now, what I find interesting is the officials there in Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte, they are saying, well, it's not really a big risk to the greater Charlotte area. I don't know that you can say that. What you had is all these people come in to this area, and if you watch the videos as I did, none of them were taking this seriously. And sadly, the convention what it showed me is that the party mentality, that the Trump mentality is that we're past it. It's over. Even though the last couple of days we've had in excess of 1,000 people across the country die from this virus, and the number just keeps going up. They're talking by December, well over 300,000 people will have died from this. But if you looked at the convention itself, they want to present the message that it's over, it's done with, it's behind us, and I think that's dangerous. But my assessment of the 2 conventions, and we're going to talk about this here in the first hour, I think they were both, for their positions, they were both exactly what each camp wanted to put out. I think Trump's going to get a little bit of a bump out of this because I do think the speech is going to resonate with the law and order crowd. I think that they've done a really great job of painting the Black Lives Matter folks as terrorists and Antifa and MS-13 all over the place. They really did the fear and smear thing, and I think you'll see a little tick up. So from this point forward, now is the race. This is when it's going to be interesting to see how both camps play this. And when we come back and talk a little bit about what came out of it yesterday and maybe what things are going to look for going forward. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Bill Scheer is going to be here to share some thoughts on the big spiel. Right back after this. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day 7,000 white and Filipino lettuce workers in California's Salinas Valley walked out on strike. Salinas was the lettuce capital of the world. The division of labor in the valley was largely ethnically based. Filipinos did much of the field labor, while whites worked in the packing sheds. At the time, Filipinos made up 40% of the total agricultural workforce in the Salinas Valley. They had founded the Filipino Labor Union a year earlier. White packing shed workers had organized into the AFL's Vegetable Packers Association. While the VPA had been reluctant to work with the FLU, they now sought to join forces in strike action. Both unions agreed neither would return to work until both had achieved victory. Together, they demanded wage increases, union recognition, and better working conditions. Losing $100,000 a day, the growers soon imported scabs of all races. They enlisted the California Highway Patrol to arrest striking Filipinos on incitement and vagrancy charges. Soon, the VPA agreed to arbitration, leaving the FLU to continue the strike alone. Some speculated the members were threatened with the loss of their charter if they refused to return to work. The striking Filipino workers continued to organize job actions and experienced increased retaliation as a result. VPA leaders publicly distanced themselves from the Filipino strikers, and racially charged vigilante violence intensified. It culminated in the burning down of the labor camp where hundreds of Filipino workers lived a month after the strike began. Vigilantes then drove as many as 800 Filipinos from the valley at gunpoint. The strike was officially called off, and those that remained returned to work. By October, both unions had won wage increases.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some of the fun coming out of the Republican convention, some of the videos that that they put out were kind of interesting. There was the one of the tenants of the public housing complex in New York that evidently 3 of the 4 of them are now coming out saying, "Hey, whoa. We're not Trump supporters. We didn't know this was for a campaign ad. We didn't know anything about this. We thought this was just the agency doing, some background, doing their work. We thought this was an official government thing. Didn't realize that we were going to be front and center in the convention to attack de Blasio. But look, it's what you get, man. This is what you get. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the conventions. Last night's spiel, I've asked Bill Scheer to come talk with us, contributing editor over at Politico magazine and one of my favorite commentators. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure.
So I got a gut thought from last night's speech. Chris Wallace says, surprisingly flat. I said, basically hit every note that it had to. Your assessment?
Well, I was surprised that it was flat. The one thing I would say for Donald Trump is that he's a reality TV star. He knows TV. He knows how to do dramatic, crazy, outlandish things that make you want to watch a train wreck. So I was expecting a crazy train wreck. I wasn't expecting kind of, fourth-rate recycled rehash, which is what we got.
Yeah.
Trump cares about ratings more than anything else, and his ratings were worse than the Democratic convention, which means only the most committed partisans were watching the speech. Trump's behind. He needs to not just goose his base, he needs to reconsolidate his base because Biden is eating into it.
Right.
And get back swing voters that seem to be gone. And you don't reach swing voters unless you get beyond the immediate audience and get into the broader media conversation. And nothing happened that was so dramatic that has overwhelmed Kenosha, Hurricane Laura, coronavirus, and now they're making their own bad news when you find out that there was deception in who was featured in the convention itself.
Yeah, but the thing is, as I said a moment ago, I think Trump does better when he goes off script, and I thought he stuck pretty much to the script. He didn't go off on his wild tangents, and the crowd in front of him, that he feeds off of, wasn't the rabid kind of, scribbling MAGA across their chest, screaming, and wasn't that crowd. So I think that he was low energy because it was a low energy event.
I mean, being on message is generally good. He should have a tight, focused message that solves the dual puzzle of getting back some of the Republicans who have gone over to Biden and a good number of the independents and seniors who have gone over to Biden. And that requires not being too flippant and glib and impromptu. But a 71-minute speech, I don't care if he was reading from the script or not. That's not an on-message speech. That's droning on and on. I'm sure the ratings went down over the course of the lecture. There weren't a couple of takeaways. Look, Biden's speech was not rhetoric for the ages, but there were some very clear takeaways from the Democratic convention. Biden's a decent guy. Republicans, you're welcome to our party. We're not trying to kick you in the face. That's pretty much it for the Democratic convention. But Biden's up by 7, 8, 9 points, and he's trying to keep the big tent that he has. Trump needed to do something much more dramatic to turn the tables, and a 71-minute laundry list speech that wasn't even accurate, that wasn't exciting, that's not going to do it.
Yeah, but I still think he's going to get a little bit of a bump out of this, 2-3 points maybe. I think he's going to get a little bump because he's scaring the hell out of white people. I mean, this is the re-election campaign. Let's scare people, because I've had people tell me I'm going to vote for Trump because our cities are burning and there's chaos and we need law and order. And he hit those notes. Now, is it going to get him reelected? I don't know, but I do think you're going to see a small bump out of this.
Well, I'm not going to predict whether there will be a small bump or not, but there is this big question. This goes beyond the convention. It really speaks to what's happening in Kenosha. Is there going to be a white backlash? Is there going to be a revulsion at some of the left-wing violence, property damage, window smashing, where that part of the convention message, Democratic City is run amok, anarchy in the streets, you need Donald Trump to maintain law and order. Will that get some of the base back? And all I can say up to this point is this. That did not happen after George Floyd. There was some of that same concern on the left or Democratic corners that you would see that backlash in the wake of George Floyd. But Biden peaked after George Floyd. You look at the poll numbers between mid-March and late May when it was just the pandemic. The poll numbers didn't move very much. It's when George Floyd is killed and you have massive protests that Biden peaks in the Real Clear Politics average at 10 points. That's late June. And that said to me, because there was some window smashing. Someone died, as we learned in the Republican convention, if you didn't know already.
Right.
It wasn't cost-free, that anarchy. But the vast majority of the protesting was not violent. In fact, after the early days of the George Floyd protest, you saw an added emphasis of the nonviolent protesters and the bigger name activists and the politicians getting out on the streets and making sure that these handful of violent anarchists don't dictate and don't represent what's going on here. And the attempts from Donald Trump to make the anarchists the face of the protest, that failed. And whatever sense of unrest there occurred in society, the blame went to Donald Trump. Hey, you said you were going to stop this. You said Obama was causing worse race relations and you were going to fix it. You didn't fix it.
Right.
So does that change this time around? Maybe, but that's not the recent evidence that we saw over the summer.
Yeah, because I don't know how you look at Floyd's murder and this most recent shooting where a guy got shot in the back 7 times at point blank range. I don't know how you go, yeah, this is what I want to see continue. And I hope you're right. I hope there isn't that backlash. even though they did this week every day. They stoked the fears. MS-13 is going to be invited to move next door. They're going to come and steal your guns. Joe Biden's this wild socialist who's going to, he's weak and he's going to kowtow to the, the Democratic, liberal hypocrites. It's bad. Is Biden a Trojan horse socialist? I think that's what it is. A social. I think he said socialist Trojan horse.
I think that charge does not stick. Biden has been around too long. He is too well known. He has made a career out of bipartisanship. He's been attacked from the left for months for being too bipartisan. He's been attacked by Donald Trump for being too law and order and pushing forth the 1994 crime bill. They had that attack in the convention last night at the same time. They're trying to say he's in cahoots with the anarchists. It doesn't add up. So I think you're going to see Biden is, say what you will about the guy. Maybe people in your audience never liked him from the get-go. I'll say this much for him. He has been walking a very fine line, trying to maintain a Big Tent coalition between African Americans and working class whites since the first day he was elected U.S. Senator in 1972. He dealt with some really difficult stuff in those busing debates in the 70s. And whether you like how he handled it or not, he politically survived and won support from both sides of the fence in the process. I think he knows how to calibrate his rhetoric, how to criticize excessive violence without throwing African Americans under the bus and making the protest writ large seem inappropriate. And you have in Wisconsin, you don't have Scott Walker as governor. You have Tony Evers and Mandela Barnes. You have a white-black duo running Wisconsin, as well as a white-black duo leading the Democratic Party. And I think people are going to look at them and say, hey, that's the kind of team we need to reduce the temperature, to calm things down, because the Donald Trump way has not achieved that after 3.5 years.
No, you're absolutely right. And, everything that they've done thus far is, and I think it's on purpose, is to inflame these protests and make them even more violent and such. And I look at last night, you had Rand Paul walking his wife through a crowd of protesters, which to me makes absolutely no sense. I don't know about you, but there's no way in hell I'm walking my wife through that crowd. Given the fact that I know my mere presence is going to make the situation worse and inflame the situation. There's no way I do it. So I got to think that was a planned kind of thing just to get a reaction. And so he could go on TV and say, I was almost killed if it weren't for those policemen. Thank goodness that they were there.
Well, whether he provoked it or not, it's still inappropriate for a mob of people to harangue him like that. I don't condone.
They didn't beat him up. He got bumped. He got bumped. That's right.
It is hardly of the level of a 17-year-old militia member killing two people. So if you're going to say, hey, Joe Biden, you need to criticize these protesters around Rand Paul. And mind you, there was a conservative writer, Eric Metaxas. There's a video of him straight up punching a bicyclist in the face unprovoked last night. So let's be consistent here.
Right.
If you're going to say the protesters are out of line with Rand Paul, I'll agree with you. So is Eric Metaxas, and so is a guy shooting people and killing them at an otherwise nonviolent protest.
Yeah, I agree. But, I looked at the video, and I got to be honest. I didn't see him being attacked. I saw people yelling at him. You have to know that's going to happen, which is why, again, I think this was one of those moments where he played the role of crisis actor very well, and good for him.
And I'll say one thing about Rand Paul. I mean, some people were yelling at him, say her name, say Breonna Taylor's name. Rand Paul has a Justice for Breonna Taylor bill.
Correct.
Now, you may say it's insufficient or it's a cover because he's flacking for Trump. I mean, those are all legitimate criticisms, but you can't say he doesn't know about the case and hasn't talked about it. In fact, he is someone that Kamala Harris has worked on criminal justice reform bills with. He's someone you can talk to. And Joe Biden is running on a message and a vision of conciliation, cooperation. Let's find the common ground. Let's get out of our silos and not live in this fractious, polarized environment. On this issue, Rand Paul is the guy you're going to at least talk to about and we should see more of it.
No, okay, good. A couple of quick things from the speech last night. Evidently, we're tearing down the border. The border walls are going to be gone if Biden's elected. He's going to tear down the wall and eliminate borders, and I guess MS-13 then can come live next door to me. Is that what I'm led to believe?
Well, Donald Trump has only built 5 miles of new wall. He has not delivered on his own promise, which was, I'm going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. He didn't do that. His former aide, Steve Bannon, is now arrested for a wall grift, trying to convince taxpayers to donate money to the wall and then funneling it to friends of his. Now, Joe Biden, he has voted for border fencing before. He's never supported an end-to-end border wall. But he has said there can be strategic placements of barrier to help law enforcement with drug trafficking and human trafficking. So it's just not factually accurate to say he is running on a demolishing of what exists, but he's not running on an argument that immigrants are inherently bad and are coming to ruin our way of life. He's saying let's have sensible border enforcement. Let's clamp down on what's bad, illegal human trafficking and drug trafficking, but be welcoming of immigrants who are coming here because they want to make a better life and can help grow our economy and actually create more jobs for everybody in America.
Yeah. Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts because China played front and center on a lot of the China virus, and of course, evidently, Trump's saying that he did something on trade, which the numbers don't bear out. But I said a year ago, China was going to be one of the main issues, and because I think Biden's a little weak on China. I'm curious your thoughts. I guess, does China want Joe Biden because they can steamroll over him, which is kind of what I got last night.
Well, I don't think China is under Trump's thumb. Look, every presidential candidate going back about 30 years, they run against China in the campaign, and they have to work with China as president because for whatever your belief on the subject, they are a big dog. They have a lot of people, they have a big economy, and they're part of the global economy, and they're a difficult actor to corral. Are they a good faith actor? In many ways, no. But how you contain them and deal with them is very difficult. Everyone demagogues the issue in the campaign, and then they have to climb down from their rhetoric as president, and that goes for Trump as well. Maybe he was somewhat tough on China relative to past presidents, but there's lots of conciliation, a lot of big bark and little bite with Trump as well. So I think it's a difficult subject no matter who's president. It's hardly the case that Donald Trump has solved the China problem in his 4 years.
Yeah, no, that is most certainly not going to happen. Oh, I know I said last question, but I got to throw this out. Is there going to be a debate? I heard Limbaugh saying that Biden's going to be out. He's going to be off the ballot at some point, and there are people who are saying no debate. September 29th in Cleveland, there's going to be debate, right?
There's going to be a debate. Both parties have an interest in a debate. If Biden ducked it, then it just validates all his conspiracy theory talk, which he doesn't want. And Biden has handled all the debates up until this point. He's got no reason to shirk them. Donald Trump, what does this guy like more than anything? Ratings. Convention, he didn't get the ratings he wanted. You have guaranteed gonzo ratings if there's an actual debate. He wants those eyeballs on him, and he might do a song and dance and make some drama out of him showing up or not. At the end of the day, he cannot walk away from a TV camera.
Yeah. Does Biden, when Trump goes low, does Biden go high, or does Biden stomp his face into the ground?
Well, that's a good question because, Biden has thrown his debate roundhouses before. You might remember from 2007 and now in a verb in 9/11. I mean, that was Joe Biden throwing a punch in Rudy Giuliani's face square in the eyes in a time when people just didn't do that to Rudy Giuliani. So he's got it in him. But at the same time, he very much wants to be seen as Uncle Joe, the unifier, not the gutter player. So if he's going to do that to Donald Trump, it's going to be very limited and very strategic, I would think. He wants to stay high as much as possible.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'd love to have you back again real soon because this is going to get, from this point forward, much hotter and much more interesting. But, Bill, I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Take care.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bill Scheer. Make sure you check out his work over at BillScheerMedia.com. We'll get links on how you can do that. He has some terrific writing over at Politico Magazine and Real Clear News. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jeff Hauser is going to be here to share some thoughts on, I guess there's maybe some talk of some kind of stimulus, maybe something coming. And we'll see how this plays with the big convention. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1963. That was the day one of the most important stands for justice and equality took place in United States history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech to 250,000 people in Washington, D.C. But did you know that one of the main organizers for the march was a man by the name of Bayard Rustin? Rustin is often left out of the history books because he was gay and because of his earlier communist affiliations. He was born in 1912 and raised in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He was raised in the Quaker tradition, and his commitment to peaceful, nonviolent protest continued into the civil rights movement. Rustin joined the Young Communist League in the 1930s, a time when communist organizers were some of the few people actively speaking out about racial injustice in the United States. After he left the Young Communist League, Rustin spent a brief time as an organizer for a march on Washington, D.C., planned in the 1940s. This movement was led by one A. Philip Randolph. The planned march was aimed at putting pressure on President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to desegregate work at industries with federal wartime manufacturing contracts. When President Roosevelt agreed to issue an order desegregating these jobs, the planned march was called off. But the idea for the march lived on and became a reality during the civil rights movement. Rustin went on to work in the labor movement. He became the founder and first director of the AFL-CIO's A. Philip Randolph Institute, which focuses on tearing down the walls of discrimination in workplaces and within the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows today came out and said, the president's willing to sign a coronavirus relief package, $1.3 trillion. Now, that's a bump up from McConnell's $1.1 trillion, nowhere near the $3.4 trillion that was passed in the HEROES Act back in May, and not close enough to the $2.2 trillion that Nancy Pelosi said that the minimum that we need. And this is one of those things where, I've had a bunch of people say, well, at least they're willing to do something. I'm going, yeah, they're only willing to half starve you instead of what they were doing before, which is completely starving you. This is, in my view, one of those disingenuous offers that they know that they're not going to pass, but it has everything to do with the optics and the politics. And here to share some thoughts on, this latest offer and maybe some thoughts on the convention, I've asked Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. He's the executive director of the Revolving Door Project, their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So what do you make of this offer? They've bumped it up $200 billion to $1.3 trillion. That's the offer from Trump. Now, I don't know if McConnell has signed off on this, if McConnell will do the marching order or not, but this is what they've thrown out today after the big spiel last night.
Yeah, Trump is in a tough and weird situation because there are many ways in which Trump is an extremely strong force within the Republican Party, and other ways in which he's very weak. And it's a constant tension. Donald Trump doesn't believe that the deficit is a huge problem. He doesn't believe that. And he is just not quite as right-wing in some regards, at least not as doctrinaire as the Republican base. But he knows that his power within the Republican Party is dependent on Mitch McConnell and other Republican senators sticking with him. And so I think Trump wants to split the difference between getting enough money out there in the late summer and early fall to goose his polling numbers, and not so much that he gets real pushback from McConnell. So I assume he has clearance from McConnell to go this far. But what he does not want is a program anywhere near as big as the magnitude of the moment. The moment is really bad right now, and it's only going to be getting worse.
Yeah.
We're only a few weeks away from the expiration of the unemployment benefits. We're also almost as significant. We're beginning the fiscal year in many states and local governments that are going to have to make massive cuts if and when it becomes clear the federal government's not going to provide them the needed aid. And so we have not yet seen those full-fledged state and local government cuts, but they are pretty imminent unless there is significant aid. So there's a lot of pressure to act right now. Trump can't act as big as his politics might demand because he has to keep Mitch McConnell happy, because otherwise Mitch McConnell can throw him under the bus and be just as happy with President Pence, especially once the election is over. So Trump's dream goal is to figure out how to do enough to retain the office next year and to keep McConnell on the right side of McConnell. And there's some tension between those two goals.
Yeah, but it seems to me that in this moment, even if you're McConnell and you want to save control of the Senate, that, wouldn't you want to get as much out there as you can so that people aren't, first and foremost going, I can't put food on the table. So I'm not worried about the cities burning or the others coming around because I might not have a table left. Isn't this one of those moments where if you're the incumbent, you want to prime the pump. You want to make sure that people know that you were the guy who delivered it. So when those checks come with your name on it, they go, look, I got a check from Donald Trump. I mean, this seems like a no-brainer to me, or am I missing something?
I mean, we're testing right now the outer limits of to what extent the real world influences election results. And I think McConnell is skeptical that the real world matters that much. I think he believes that incumbents can potentially win on culture war issues, that people will endure economic duress in order to own the libs. And I mean, in some states, the latest polling out of Kentucky is not exactly encouraging. Perhaps that's true in some places. I think that's probably not going to be true for Susan Collins or Cory Gardner or Martha McSally, and hopefully not for Joni Ernst or Tom Tillis and a couple others. But it seems to me that McConnell is making a decision that, for the most part, Republicans, at least in the Senate, their electoral hopes are not tethered to the unemployment rate in any sort of direct way, which is, overcomes a lot of conventional wisdom. I think, sadly, there might be some truth in our very polarized era, that there's some truth to it. And in the long run, Democrats need to think about how that might be the case and what they can do to start performing better in an election cycle when, the economic conditions suggest that they should be able to throw all of the bums out. But in the near term, I think McConnell seems to be willing to take the loss and just hold the line on this ideology, which is, a bit crazy and very scary.
Yeah, but for a president who ran on, we're gonna solve the deficit problem, we're gonna pay off the debt, we're gonna do all these things, to have the greatest increase in federal deficit spending since World War II. And yes, I know the pandemic was a huge driver in this, but he was still going to be far north of $1 trillion even without the pandemic. So to say that he had solved that, sorry, I'm not buying it. He was spending like a drunken sailor before the pandemic.
Yeah. I'm not sure McConnell cares about the deficit as such, so much as he, for one thing, has kind of defined his career by hating unions. And that's a big motivating force. McConnell, and obviously in the United States in 2020, the state and local governments are among the most heavily unionized sectors in the economy. And so I think McConnell has been pretty direct that he sees aid to state and local governments as some sort of welfare for union workers, which is beyond the insane view of everyone from garbage men to firefighters to nurses to teachers, besides how horrible and offensive that is. It's kind of crazy. It's a basic economic illogic. I mean, the federal government can print its own money. State and local governments cannot. That's why the federal government needs to help out state and local governments who are not the ones responsible for the coronavirus running rampant perpetually in America. That's Donald Trump's fault. So, I mean, it's crazy, but I think he is doing this to mess over the state and local employee unions. And I think he's an old school Republican who hates the notion of strong unemployment benefits, because if workers have the possibility of strong unemployment benefits, they may not accept the worst working conditions imaginable or the lowest wages. And he wants employers to knock wages down in this environment, to exploit the weakness of America's labor market at this point to lower wages.
No, you're spot on, and it's I love the way you frame that. It's basically union busting on steroids, and it plays into they get to go after those states that didn't vote for them, the blue states, which are heavily unionized. Even in this day when union rates are, density rates are in the private sector 6.7% and just over 10% across all workers. But there's still those blue states that have some density left. And you're right. This is probably a way to go after them. But here's the thing, red states are going to be affected by this too. I mean, on a much lesser level. But their people are still going to go without the social services that are necessary. They're still going to be the ones who don't get the things that they need. I mean, it's kind of a bizarre scenario.
Yeah, I'm not even totally sure. I mean, maybe you've seen better statistics than I'm not sure red states are even any real materially better off than blue states on this. I mean, obviously, red states, many of them are less unionized in their workforces, but I think like the red ink that is going to happen through this fiscal year in state and local governments, where sales tax is going to be way down, property values and therefore property taxes are going to be down in places. I mean, I think that's occurring, pretty much. We're all united in living in this United States of COVID and under Donald Trump. So I think there's going to be pain everywhere, but I think they just don't really care. I mean, I work with Dean Baker. He thinks like part of the reason the stock market has gone up is that there's an assessment that wages are going to go down, and so profits will go up. That capital will take from labor, and that's it's a bleak, dark view, but it might well be like how rich people are thinking right now.
Yeah, that's scary. Let me get your thoughts on the big convention. Did you happen to catch the 71-minute spiel last night?
I really did not directly. I followed a lot of the after effect, but I just could not make myself. I mean, yes, I work in politics. I probably, if I were better at my job, would have made myself endure. But I mean, you only live once, and
yeah, you didn't miss anything because I think what he had to say was very predictable. It was basically the message of the prior days. Be afraid. MS-13's coming. Joe Biden's a socialist. The cities are burning. Joe Biden's a socialist. Things are bad. Joe Biden's going to make it worse. I guess that was the spiel, right?
I mean, and the backdrop, of course, was the White House, which, to those of us who do anti-corruption work, is pretty horrifying, because he was committing a crime on national TV. He was using federal government employees to put on a political show that at least in terms of its backdrop, looked good. I mean, of course, he also had a large unmasked audience. And the last time he had a large unmasked audience, you had a businessman and former presidential candidate and ally, Herman Cain, die a couple weeks later, seemingly as a direct result of attendance. So God knows what's going to happen as a result of the unmasked masses yearning to breathe whatever they were breathing from Trump. But it was a crime. It was a crime scene. I mean, he is committing crimes every day, and using the White House for a political event like that was really horrifying. And it was yet another example of America's media not really stepping up to the moment, because basically I saw tons of compliments from mainstream reporters about the backdrop and how impressive it all looked.
Oh no, it was. I said at the beginning it was really impressive, and even Vladimir Putin had to go, "Wow, that was pretty good." That wasn't bad. I couldn't have done any better.
Yeah, I mean, right, maybe there were some advanced people, zooming in or flying in from Moscow to offer some advice on how you take iconic institutions of the state and use them for a candidate. Because it's not a common thing in America. It's another sad day.
Yeah, I mean, as I was watching it, I was going, "Can you imagine if Barack Obama would have done this? Could you imagine?"
No, I mean, this is apparently the 6-year anniversary today of the tremendous scandal when Barack Obama wore a tan suit, and members of the media thought that was more comment worthy than apparently using the White House as a political prop.
Yeah.
So
we do most certainly live in interesting times and scary times. Anything positive you think came out of this week's little spiel? I'm of the mindset that each convention they presented, their arguments. I think we as the American people can take a look at it. Trump brought us, fear and smear and be afraid. And I thought Biden brought us, hey, we're going to come out of the darkness. We're going to move forward. I thought he had a very positive message and didn't fixate on Trump the whole time.
Yes, I think it was right for Biden to not fixate on Trump. I think that I'm not the biggest fan of relying on being a better person as the argument for why someone's a better president, which I think is a lot of Biden's argument. I think it's very true that Biden is a clearly better person. I do worry that Trump's view is to try to make his pathologies sort of work for you. The notion that he's this shrewd businessman who understands stuff and is willing to make the hard decisions that might benefit you, the swing voter. I'd like to take that on a little bit more directly and talk about how Trump's ostensible business skills have not led to a well-functioning government. In fact, quite the contrary, and that his incompetence and corruption materially impact ordinary people every day of their lives, from the Post Service not working to the Center for Disease Control not controlling disease. Every day we're living the consequences of an incompetent and corrupt failed businessman turned failed president. But I definitely think that Biden has convinced people he is a much more fundamentally decent person. I do think that is a good argument. I don't think it's the only argument, and I hope Democrats make a better argument over time about how the things that make Trump so awful as a person do connect to how he is as president.
Yeah, you're right, and I at this moment, just being a better person, being a decent human being, is an important quality, I think, and I'm hoping a lot of us go, I think we just want a decent human being to be in that office.
Yeah, it would make my life so I would be so much less stressed every day.
Yeah, but as I said, as I've said,
a lot worse than me.
Biden winning would make my life much more difficult, because this is a tough job. With Trump, all I got to do is look at his Twitter feed, and he pretty much does my show prep for me.
Yeah, late night hosts, their lives will be so much harder. I mean, that was actually under Obama. He was just so hard to make fun of because he was like such a smart, thoughtful person. Even when I disagreed with him, at times you couldn't doubt that he was a smart, thoughtful, decent person.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you: do you think Trump gets a bump out of last night's speech? Do you think that? I said I think it gets a little bit of a bump, as where Biden didn't. His favorables went up, but thoughts? Do you think the fear, the be afraid of the others? The cities are burning. Do you think that's gonna bump the suburban vote a little bit?
Not really. I mean, my fear is just that over time, the "I'm a shrewd businessman" economy message, that Trump will figure out a way to get onto it. I mean, I think the fact that there's not a deal. I mean, this is where, it's just crazy that the Republicans can't make a deal, where I do think the ideology and McConnell's unwillingness is a huge problem, because I think Trump's best argument in terms of where public opinion is, where they give him this real credit on the economy that is undeserved as a former businessman, I think his winning argument is that he will better deliver on the economy, and that if it weren't for this accidental virus that had nothing to do with him, in his telling, the economy would be better. I think that's his best way out. I don't think he got on that message well at the convention. I don't know that Biden didn't preempt it as much as I want, but Trump didn't take full advantage. And I think the next couple months it's going to be a question of, can Trump figure out a way to make an economic message get him close enough for the election to steal?
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out as the horse race officially begins today, in my view. But Jeff, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Jeff Hauser, he is the executive director there of the Revolving Door Project. Make sure you check out their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1963. That was the day of one of the most iconic stands for justice and equality in United States history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech to 250,000 people in Washington, D.C. But did you know the official title for that history-making event was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom? The popular memory of the March on Washington focuses on the fight for freedom, especially the right for Black Americans to access public spaces and the voting booth. But the march organizers also understood that economic justice was a fundamental part of this broader call for freedom. As Dr. King once famously asked, "What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger?" This emphasis on the importance of jobs and economic justice perhaps was most represented by A. Philip Randolph. He was one of the lead organizers of the 1963 March on Washington. Randolph was the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the nation's first national African-American union. Starting in World War I, Randolph fought for an end to employment discrimination. His efforts in planning the March on Washington were an extension of that earlier work. Organized labor had a mixed response to the march. The AFL-CIO did not endorse the march. Walter Reuther, head of the United Auto Workers, shared the stage in Washington, D.C. with Dr. King and A. Philip Randolph that day. It is important to remember the connection between the call for civil rights and the demand for the right to employment, fair wages, and dignity at the workplace. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So MGM Resorts said today that they're going to be laying off nearly 20,000 employees, and here in the U.S. mostly, because we just haven't gotten this virus under control. They're best known for, evidently they own the Bellagio, Mandalay Bay, the MGM Grand. They own New York, the Mirage. They basically own a good portion of Vegas. They've got casinos and hotels in states across the country: Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, D.C. They're heavily into the gambling and hotel stuff, but they're going to lay off nearly 20,000 of their 63,000 person workforce. And that's 63,000 people across the globe. And we're going to lay off nearly 20,000 of them, mostly right here in the U.S. And you go, we still can't get a virus deal. We still can't get something to help those nearly 20,000 workers. And understand, I think it was United who said they're going to lay off. It was like some obscene number of pilots, like 200,000 or something. And understand, as the further we go down the road in this, it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse, especially when the furlough, the evictions start happening, when people start getting kicked out of their homes. That's going to be one of those moments where you go, oh, why did we do something? We're kind of living in the calm. This is the calm before the storm. The fact that we have such failed leadership during this moment where we should be full on preparing for what's coming next. And mark my words, bad stuff's coming. And this administration is completely fallen down in their responsibility to do anything to prepare us for it. And I hope come November, they're held accountable for it. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, China was front and center at the RNC convention. Is Donald Trump the China beater? Does China want Joe Biden? Quick break, right back to answer those questions. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Gosh, our trasher-in-chief has really been busy lately, calling Kamala Harris nasty and calling our post offices a joke. But instead of trash talking, shouldn't a president be, running the government? Nah, that bores him. Besides, that's why he packed his cabinet with all those corporate lobbyists who are skilled at trying to rig our government to serve moneyed elites. Now, empowered by Trump, these special interests are our government, literally setting and running America's economic, environmental, health, and other public policies. And what a job they're doing. On us. Check out Andrew Wheeler, head of Trump's EPA. He had been the top lobbyist for a coal mining giant, constantly fighting environmental rules to make this notoriously foul industry clean up its act. Now, the befouler's lobbyist is making the rules, allowing big coal and other fossil fuel giants to pour more toxic contaminants into our air and water. Wheeler wails that his poor multi-billion-dollar former clients must be freed from burdensome requirements to limit the damage they do to the health of America's people and our planet. Burdensome? His latest edict frees oil and gas corporations from having to fix methane leaks in their wells, pipelines, etc. Fixing leaks is burdensome? Hello, if you had a gas leak at your house, would you not want to burden the company to come fix it? Not only is methane a potent greenhouse gas causing climate change, but Wheeler's don't worry about it favor to his industry buddies comes just as scientists have discovered that methane leaks are 2 to 3 times worse than his EPA has been reporting. This means the industry is driving us toward a climate crisis faster than anyone realized. This is Jim Hightower saying, talk about nasty. The Trumpeteers have turned government totally bass-ackwards, protecting polluters instead of people.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently, according to the Trump RNC, or the Trump convention, Joe Biden is the preferred candidate of China. China wants Joe Biden, so therefore you should not vote for Joe Biden. He's the socialist Trojan horse. He's going to surrender. The same lines that kind of we heard just to a lesser extent about Obama. They're trying to put on Joe. But here's the thing. The question is, for all the tough talk and all the stuff, have we actually gotten anywhere more positive with regard to China? And here to answer some of those questions. In fact, the big story today was that we have our Department of Commerce has blacklisted 24 Chinese firms for, according to them, helping the Chinese military construct and militarize the internationally condemned artificial islands in the South China Sea. This going to help, or is this just going to make things worse? Here to share some thoughts on that. I've asked Emily Delabure to come talk with us. She is the co-founder of Horizon Advisory. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you for having me on. It's great to be here.
So, I'm looking at this story. We've blacklisted 24 Chinese firms. Evidently, we're going to be pulling the visas or putting some restrictions on visas on a bunch of unspecified number of Chinese individuals. We're cracking down on China, Emily.
We're at least saying that we are, right? And I mean, there's so many different ways to read the story, right? One of the major companies that's on this list is CCCC, which is China Communications Construction Company, and its subsidiaries. And CCCC is like China's big state-backed monolith in infrastructure construction. It builds like all of China's exploitative overseas projects. It is a huge part of China's military civil fusion program. It's also the company that built the so-called magic island builders that are the ones creating artificial islands in the South China Sea. So yes, we should absolutely be doing something about this. The problem is that are sanctions enough? Is this isolated? And are we responding in a comprehensive fashion? And just today, so CCCC is in the process of acquiring a significant stake in Portugal's largest, let's say, port company. It's a maritime company.
Right.
So what does it mean if we're sanctioning CCCC if that's going through at the same time?
That's a good question. What does it mean?
And the thing is, like, what it means is that we risk not doing this with the degree of allied and partnered involvement and cooperation that's necessary. And I mean, I say this over and over when I'm talking to you, right? We can't do this alone, and we need it to be a large-scale approach. But also, are we just going to keep coming out and sanctioning Chinese state-owned enterprises, or are we going to do something that's like comprehensive and strategic, but also creates a positive alternative? You can't just play defense in this fight.
No, you're right. But here's the thing. I mean, you look at, Trump has told us he alone can do everything. So it's not surprising that we have this go it alone strategy that isn't really a strategy at all. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. I saw this today and I'm going, okay, we're gonna have some restrictions on these companies and do some visa restrictions. What's the end game? I mean, as I'm reading through this story, I find out that China's built more than 3,000 acres of what they're calling air defense and airship missile launch sites. They've been doing this since 2013, and sadly, international law said you can't do it, but they're still doing it. So what are we going to do to stop it? I guess is the question.
Exactly, and I mean, I think you just said it, right? International law says you can't do this, but they're still doing it. We have all of these systems and laws and international institutions in place that are supposed to be creating a certain world order and a certain set of regulations. And China just consistently is able to break those rules and circumvent those regulations and do whatever it wants to do. And we're like, oh, that's against international law. And that doesn't do it. So what we really this is a systemic contest. It's not about this company or that company. It's about the fundamental things that set our world order and whether or not they're effective.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, on Wednesday, evidently, it's been reported that China fired 2 missiles into the area that's, I guess, disputed in the South China Sea. It's being, said as a warning to us. Is this the warning? I mean, is this the first shot of maybe this isn't going to just be a tech war? Maybe this could, or a trade war, that this could escalate into something more?
Yeah, I mean, the past week has seen any number of signals of potential kinetic movement, well unlike what we normally see. There was also an accusation from China that a U.S. spy plane went through a no-fly zone as they were conducting an exercise. And this is a lot of moving pieces that get really scary. My take, China doesn't want a kinetic war. They don't want to be firing missiles. What they do is that they escalate and they say it's going to be, there's going to be confrontation so that we back down and so that we get scared. That's their strategic calculus.
Right.
But that doesn't make this any less scary, and that doesn't, make it any less real that the risk of an accident here is a very real risk.
And I got to imagine that this is learned behavior because of this administration. That I truly believe Trump doesn't want war. I mean, I have some people who think that he wants to blow things up. I'm going, I don't know. I think he's the bully, like a lot of bullies. You push them, and they eventually back down. I think that's kind of what China's doing here. They're seeing our bully as a paper tiger, and they're going to push him as far as they can.
One of the things, so if you look like far back, or not that far back really, 5-10 years ago, what China was writing about the U.S. and the U.S.-China competition, they said, look, the U.S. is going to be led by a bunch of very conservative, very predictable people who are going to keep, Obama types, right, who are going to keep going down this path and playing by the rules. And that's great because we being China here, get to go ahead with our strategy.
Which is breaking the rules.
And of course, exactly. And taking advantage of these people who, believe in order and, the rule system. Of course, that didn't really play out because we got the Trump administration. And, China was very much like thrown on its heels because they had this all gamed out and suddenly things weren't going according to game. The question is, what happens now? Because it is good, right? They have been taken by surprise. It's very real that we're in a competition, but now we have to get to the point where we're actually competing and doing so strategically and intelligently and with our allies.
Yeah, but I'm looking at this, and I remember reading stories about during the Eisenhower years where Eisenhower sent the Pacific Fleet to surround this area that we're still disputing over. We're not going to do anything like that, are we?
I mean, I'm going to say no, I don't think so. But also, these days, anything can happen. There's this pandemic. There's a hurricane.
Yeah.
If an alien landed in front of me right now, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, maybe, who knows? Maybe we will see aliens. But, here's the weird thing. And this is, I've had a bunch of people, point out the fact that, the Chinese, have done pretty well with the virus. I mean, for the reports that we see, if you can believe them, we have not. This virus is one of those things that, they may not have, they didn't send it to us on purpose, but it's been, quite fortuitous for them that they've been able to kind of get by it, and we're still screwing around. In fact, we had a super spreader event yesterday that masked as a presidential acceptance speech. I got to imagine that they're just going to sit back and go, no, they'll destroy themselves.
And they are so good at taking advantage of opportunities. And that's the thing. China can't turn on a dime, but it is very good at taking its strategy and saying, how do we apply that for this present moment of opportunity? And we're really good at saying, oh no, the world has changed. This means that we're paralyzed.
Yeah, it's not a good moment. Now, there was a report today that came out that evidently Mike Pompeo, our Secretary of State, is pressing Benjamin Netanyahu to kind of cool it with China. Is this the attempt by the administration to go, oh, we can't go it alone? Maybe we do need to start reaching out to some of our allies and get them, back on our side. I mean, start with Israel, I guess. Is this how I'm reading this, or give me your thoughts?
Yes. The question is, is this too little, too late at this point? Because China has already made such inroads. And now I'm going to be making a quick diversion to my favorite hobby horse these days. But so the U.S. keeps responding to China's global offensive by trying to compete in the same places where China has already made inroads, which is that's an approach that's destined to lose because you're just reacting and you're always one step behind and you're playing on the opponent's strong side. And what if the U.S. were just to stop for a second and say, let's be a little creative here. Let's play to our opponent's weaknesses and let's try to do something where we're actually really strong. Why don't we go recognize Taiwan as a country? And I mean, at this point, Taiwan is a thriving democracy that's a strong ally and partner. And that would be a huge deal. And we could do that at no cost and really target a Chinese weakness. And instead, we're trying to, as you said, whack-a-mole, fight a losing battle against places where China has already shored up strength, or just go in a very tactical way, because we want to respond rather than setting the scene ourselves.
Yeah, but doesn't that, the appearance then becomes, we're fighting where the battles are, Emily, because, if you watch the RNC convention this week, evidently China wants Joe Biden.
Which then, don't you think, and why wasn't China in the DNC? That again, I mean, this is like the same thing, right? We could target China's weakness by saying, let's recognize Taiwan. The Democratic Party could just pull that whole rug from under the whole China wants Biden by getting out there and being really hard on China.
Which is what I'm hoping, because you and I have had, I think one of the first conversations we had was, Joe Biden came out and said that, China's not a problem in his view. That they're a big country, they've got all these structural problems, and he went into a whole long explanation of why he thought that. I disagree with him, but will the Democratic Party do that? And I fear not. And so this is why I think the Trump people have really highlighted this issue. Because while he is ineffective, while he has inflamed things, who knows, we may start lobbing bombs at each other before you know it. He hasn't really accomplished anything. And that's my problem. It's one thing to know that there's a problem. It's another thing to make it worse.
Yeah, and we don't have very much time to move from like admiring this problem to actually competing for it. So yeah, it's well past time. And I mean, there's some part of me that's an optimist. I don't really know where it is, but it's there somewhere. And I look at these things like the CCCC sanctions, and I say, okay, this is great. We're being serious, but okay, now let's get the strategy. And then I keep saying that over and over and over. And I think we've lobbed enough beginning volleys that we need something out there that's going to be a real response.
Yeah. Now blacklisting these companies, what does that mean? Does that mean, now we're not going to allow them to build in the U.S. We're not going to buy their products? Is that what that means, or is this just we're putting something on paper? Because look, you look around this country, the Chinese government and their state-owned enterprises, they own an awful lot here in the U.S. and I don't think most of us even realize how much.
Yeah, and also we have an example of this, right? There's the Huawei example. I think it's been 2 years that we've been locked in this Huawei tussle, and there were just waivers given to, or prepared to be given to the DoD. So if we can't be serious about applying the Huawei restrictions to our own Department of Defense, are we going to be serious on following through on any of these?
Right.
And the next beat on that is, even if we are serious, how good are we at actually monitoring and knowing? Because it's so easy for China, for CCCC or any of these Chinese companies to start a new subsidiary and then invest in a U.S. company or pool of capital and then have something operating in the U.S. without anyone realizing that they're connected to CCCC, because we simply don't have the information monitoring and awareness in place.
But again, you look back at this, and we can point to different products and different stuff that they make. We've basically given this stuff away, and it comes back to how open our society is. So aren't we destined to be just decimated in this because of, and to use the right-wing frame, because of our freedom and our liberty, that we've allowed these companies to have so much access to our markets and to our vital infrastructure?
And that's the question, right? Is this a verdict we're getting on the nature, like on whether or not open free market democracy can survive? Or is the question that our open free market democracy has been led astray and it can be put on the right path? Like, if America starts investing in the real economy and in manufacturing and in actually being able to create things rather than letting all of our resources go to the virtual economies that are attached to reality and that are inclined to be in China's pocket and or get subverted because they're built on a virtual world, then can we fix things, right? Because maybe maybe this can be fixed. Maybe you can take an open, trusting, fragmented society and you can also tell it that it has to have its strength be the real economy, and then it can stay strong. and China comes in and there's no one to take advantage of.
But isn't that what what Trump's platform is? I mean, obviously the Republican Party didn't come out with a platform. They just said, we're going to let dear leader decide how things are going to go. He said manufacturing is important. In fact, he said it in 2016. Hasn't delivered on anything. In fact, we have fewer manufacturing jobs today than we did then. Even without the virus, I think that would have held true. We've fallen behind on a lot of technological issues. You talk an awful lot about the 5G. One of the things that he's in his want for a second term is to have us develop our own 5G. These are the kind of things that I think national security concerns have to come front and foremost. And I think Biden wants to do the same thing. I think it's important that we have these conversations and talk about exactly what it is we need to be doing against China, because it's just easy to go, well, we're against China. Thinking why is why, and I think it's important that exactly what you're laying out.
And we don't have to reject whatever model has been laid out in the past 4 years, but if we can look at it and we say, okay, that's true, China's a threat. Yes, that's true. We need to invest in manufacturing. Yes, we need to invest in technology, but then do that in a smart, comprehensive way and sit down and say, okay, what is 5G? It's applying technology and it's also building that infrastructure. And oh wait, that infrastructure, that's manufacturing there, and that's our larger infrastructure. And if we can go in and we can turn these things into not like the soundbite and not the buzzword, but the real boring policy that they are, and in a real in an actual systemic way too, because this is a fault of both parties, but there's that inclination to say, okay, I just need one policy for this and one policy for that, and then we figure it out. But our system is falling apart, and this is also, because of that, a chance to remake it, but remake it in a way that's thinking about foundations and thinking about how things work and structures.
Yeah, I'm with you. Last question. I look at these blacklistings and I look at the timing of all of this, and it's all very curious to me. They seem like I said at the beginning, whack-a-mole. It seems more for to get the headline and more for the attention than to actually have a policy and a way forward. So I have very little faith that this is gonna matter in the long term.
No, I need to find what I told you there was no optimist part of me, right? So now I need to find where that is.
Yeah.
Maybe the language is changing, and I'm a broken record at this point. I think I've said this every time we've talked. It's almost no longer a question that China is a threat, and it's almost no longer a question that China's commercial sector, both state-owned and state-backed, and even private enterprises, are part of that threat.
Right.
And that's a change in awareness that's really crucial. So if we can take that change in awareness, that recognition, we can put it alongside the point about competing over technology and investing in our real economy. And those are the three prongs we need to actually shape a strategy.
Yeah, you need something better than just a couple of headlines. Emily, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. As always, important stuff. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back again and talk to us again real soon.
Always. It's very exciting.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the time. Again, to me, this is one of those really important issues that I'm not buying the whole, China wants Biden thing. I'm not buying the Trump is our savior thing. But also, you got to realize China's a real threat. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Laura is forecast to strengthen, possibly into a major hurricane, before making landfall along the Texas or Louisiana coast.
Twin storms pummel the Gulf Coast. Northern California fires rage out of control. Plus,
we can and we will deal with climate change.
2020 Democratic National Convention touts climate action.
All of that touting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Trump administration finalized plans to open up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. It marks a major step towards reviving fossil fuel development in an area that has been untouched for 3 decades.
Untouched for 3 decades. For a second, I thought they were talking about Mike Pence.
Oh, snap.
Bing, 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 bing.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you have long warned about multiple disasters happening all at once, and that doesn't even include the Republican National Convention.
This is true, and here we are. Multiple simultaneous disasters, storms and wildfires, and a pandemic all at once. First, 2 storms are hitting the United States Gulf Coast in the span of just 48 hours. It's extremely rare to have 2 storms simultaneously churning in the Gulf. Hurricane Marco hit Louisiana as a tropical storm on Monday, bringing heavy rains and flooding. And as we go to air, Laura is now a serious threat to Louisiana and Texas, likely to hit midweek. In a press conference, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards warned that the state's emergency response is already strained by the pandemic, and residents should not get complacent.
The temporal proximity and the geographic proximity of these storms pose a challenge that, quite frankly, we've not seen before. And as a result, we don't know exactly what to expect.
The National Hurricane Center warns that no matter where Laura ultimately makes landfall, quote, winds, storm surge, and rainfall hazards will extend far from the center. And yes, man-made climate change does play a role, according to Washington Post weather editor Andrew Friedman on PBS NewsHour.
The Atlantic sea surface temperatures are so much warmer than average right now. So instead of giving just regular gasoline to these storms, you're essentially giving them rocket fuel.
Bing, 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 bing. Meanwhile, a state of emergency in California, where more than 1 million acres have burned, driven by extreme heat and high winds. In just 1 week, 2 fires in Northern California exploded into the 2nd and 3rd largest fires in the state's history. State officials say they are struggling to combat the unprecedented number of fires across the state. There's not enough equipment or personnel to fight them. Plus, the coronavirus pandemic has curtailed the number of state prisoners that are available to man fire crews.
And I suspect the coronavirus pandemic has also limited the number of shelters, whether it's the fires in California or the storms down in the Gulf Coast, shelters that people can safely go to and social distance within.
And yes, the storms that exploded over the past few days in California and Colorado show clear influences of man-made global warming. Multiple lines of evidence show how a warming and drying climate is increasing the size and severity of fires throughout the United States West.
Yeah, but Donald Trump said it was because we didn't rake the leaves in our forest floors here in California.
Yeah, he keeps saying that. I think he needs to come up with some new insane material.
Oh, that's not insane enough?
Action on man-made climate change was woven throughout the Democratic National Convention to formally nominate Joe Biden for president last week. In his acceptance speech, Biden placed climate among the top 4 of the biggest issues facing the nation, along with the pandemic, the economy, and systemic racism. Biden has proposed a comprehensive $2 trillion plan to solve the climate crisis and lift the U.S. economy out of the downturn that has been caused by the coronavirus pandemic and create new jobs by transitioning the nation to clean energy no later than 2050.
We can and we will deal with climate change. It's not only a crisis, it's an enormous opportunity. An opportunity for America to lead the world in clean energy and create millions of new, good-paying jobs in the process.
Finally, some strange but good news in Alaska. Just weeks after releasing an environmental report minimizing the impact of the controversial proposed Pebble mine, the Trump administration on Monday suddenly paused the permitting process, giving the mine's developers 90 days to explain how they would offset damage to the world's most prolific salmon fishery. Apparently, Trump's son, Don Jr., and a few Fox News personalities have been been lobbying for the change.
Well, I guess that's all it takes. If Fox News is against it, so is Donald Trump. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. We're on a truncated schedule here at the Green News Report during our convention coverage, so we will see you next month. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So last night, taking a look at the big speech, you saw the clips of all the representatives and the senators leaving the event, and the Rand Paul one caught my attention because he claimed he was assaulted, he was accosted, he was attacked. Because it looked like somebody just, the crowd just kind of bumped. If you've ever been in a crowd, a large crowd, that, the wave of humanity moves things along. It's not like somebody came after him like his neighbor did and knocked him off the lawnmower. That's an attack. Being bumped into, not so much. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big speech and maybe the comparison between the DNC and the RNC conventions. I've asked our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So let's start with the big speech. Seemed like a Joe Biden fixation. Seemed like the only thing going on between Donald Trump's ears is his disdain, dislike, hatred of Joe Biden.
Well, there's no doubt this is going to be aggressive. No question about it. Biden did not mention Trump's name one single time during his speech. And I think Trump mentioned Biden 44 times. And, that's what they're going to do. They're going to, run the ads based on it. They're going to be extremely aggressive. I mean, overall, I was technically forced to watch both conventions. I love them live, but virtual, is a little different, but I did. And looking at the two conventions, I've got to say that probably, and I have friends that say, oh, the most disgusting thing on earth, but probably the way they did most of it, not all of it, they're going to get some kind of small bump out of it.
That's where Joe Biden saw a little bit of his favorables go up, no real bump because he was a little bit ahead. This could make this a 50-50 race, no?
Yes, you're right. And that's the other thing. There's a lot of unpredictables. Now, I saw where, they said, well, Biden shouldn't debate Trump. And in my opinion, if he does not debate Trump, he's going to have problems because they are going to make the entire rest of the election of, where's Joe? Put him on milk cartons. He's afraid. He's got dementia. You name it, they'll say it.
Yeah,
so he's got to debate.
No,
but
absolutely. I've been reading this today, and Rush Limbaugh came out yesterday and said, Joe Biden's going to disappear. He's not going to be on the ballot in November because he's afraid. And it kind of reminded me, when you were 8, 9, 10 years old in the school, in the playground, and you were baiting two sides into getting into a fight,
right.
And you had both sides pushing their guy, going, yeah, go ahead, you can do it. This is what it seems to have devolved to me at this point. That now this is basically just a school. It's a sandbox fight.
Well, it is, and this election is going to be what I would call juvenile in the sense that, this is just, I can write the scripts for all of this, and it's going to boil down to, Joe Biden and the Marxists versus Donald Trump and the saviors, not the right wingers.
Right.
Donald Trump and the saviors. They're going to keep your house from being burnt down. It's going to be that aggressive. And then it's going to boil down to China. And Biden's going to have to make sure he gets aggressive on that issue. Now, there's no doubt Kamala Harris is going to outshine Pence.
Right.
No question about it. That debate is going to be, outshined. On the Biden debate, he's going to have to make sure, I think, Biden, that if Trump goes too low, that, he defends himself, but don't go to that level, but be, aggressive Biden will have to be. But they have to debate. And, Biden's seasoned. He's been around a long time. Look, Trump's going to say things that aren't accurate. Biden's going to say things maybe that aren't accurate. But then Trump will aggressively attack Biden for not being accurate.
Right. And
Biden has to attack back. But then again, that doesn't work that good on Trump because everybody's used to it.
Yeah, and nothing no amount of fact checking applies to him, and it's pretty interesting. But I don't know where this talk of there's not going to be a debate comes from, because I thought the first one was scheduled in Cleveland on the 29th of September. I thought it's already scheduled.
It is. There's just a couple of people on the political, on the Democratic side that say, well, why lower yourself? You shouldn't debate. And of course, the media picks that up as, maybe they're not going to debate. They're going to debate.
Yeah.
Then somebody suggested, well, don't debate until he produces taxes. Well, that's not happening.
Yeah. That's almost
They're
as
not gonna be
stupid as
produced.
Trump saying, well, I'm not going to do anything until he's drug tested. Which, again, I'm not against the idea of drug testing politicians. I think they should be treated just like truck drivers. We should have a random pool, and hey, here's your cup. It's your time. That's simple.
Sure. That's like when they were talking about testing people that were receiving human services. Well, how about the corporations that get government money?
Yep.
And those board directors, they should be tested if you're going to do that.
I'm right there with you. You should test if we're testing the little guy, we got to test the big guy. So let me, just to bring this back to the debate then. Is it your view that, because it's my view that Biden has to come out and maybe not absolutely take him down, but at least look like he put up a fight. So is it your view that Biden's got to come out swinging?
Yes. I mean, here's what I say about the low. The president may actually, during the debate, call him Sleepy Joe. He may actually do that. And Biden can poke fun at him, because if I were, running this campaign for Biden, I would make sure Biden pokes fun at him, because that will set Trump off like a skyrocket. That. He's thin-skinned. But he doesn't have to get to the point where he calls him, or something about his hair or something. But Biden has to come out swinging. He got to be aggressive. He has to be aggressive.
Yeah, as where Hillary tried on a certain level to be above the fray, and I said this and I forget who said it. I think it may have been Michelle Obama. Or I know Hillary picked up on it, and she had said it a bunch. When they go low, we go high. I was at the time I was going, no, that's a dumb idea.
Yep.
When they go low, you step on them and stomp them into the ground. When I was playing football, the coaches always said, when they go for your knees, you push their face in the mud. This is what I think has to happen.
Well, Hillary should have learned the lesson during the Republican primary. John Kasich, John, I know John. He has never been the nice guy, ever. But he became Mr. Rogers during the primary. Yeah. And it didn't work. This wasn't a Mr. Rogers year. And Hillary Clinton didn't learn this. I think Joe Biden will have learned this. He can't let Donald, Trump step all over him like a doormat. And when I say low, he doesn't, like I said, need to refer to orange or hair, but he needs to be aggressive. He needs to be aggressive.
Yeah, no small hand jokes or anything like that.
Right, but he does, because if he's not, Trump will walk all over him, and then Trump becomes the strong guy. And for those undecided or up in the air, they're like, well, I don't like Donald Trump, but, at least he's going to be tough,
You stop and you think about it. Is that what this is all devolved down to?
Oh, yes.
I mean, at the end of it, maybe just Joe Biden should just roll up his sleeve and goes, all right, shut your mouth, let's go. Call me Sleepy Joe one more time, I'm going to knock your teeth out. Is that what it's going to come to?
Or challenging to run around to jog around the room or something.
There's the intellectual part of me that goes, this should be about how we're going to make people's lives better, how we're going to, policies that are going to, create new jobs and move us into the 21st century. And with all of the things going on around the world, the pandemic, all of the the massive numbers of unemployment, uninsured, homelessness that's coming because of the mass evictions we know are on the way, children going to bed hungry, all of these problems, and it's going to devolve down to whether we think that the guy's tough enough.
Sure. I mean, it is because, when it comes to issues, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, and of course, Trump is going to go wild on China. Trump is going to say, you were there, you voted for this, you love China, your son loves China, your son did a deal, and it doesn't matter if Biden comes back and says, well, Jared Kushner and Ivanka and, all these things, because Trump's going to knock him at China. And so Joe Biden has to knock back on that issue. He has to.
So what would be, if you were advising him, what's the effective strategy here? Because, the sad reality is, he's right. I mean, Biden, said, and I said, when he said it, I'm going, this is trouble. He said that China's not a problem, that, and he went into a bunch of reasons why they're disconnected and all of this stuff. But, so what's an effective response to that attack?
Well, and he did say it. What he has to say is, look, I've looked at this policy, I've evaluated it, and it's just a fact that, I need to be aggressive. I'm going to be aggressive. I will be aggressive. I've had a history of being aggressive on issues. He can say that, standing up for workers, and I'm going to do it. And then I would say, what have you really done? You have done zero with China.
Right.
You have done zero. You didn't help them market. There's more imports coming in. I turn it back on what Trump hasn't done.
Right. No, I mean, because, just the other day I pointed out our trade deficit has actually grown, especially since the virus.
Right.
The agricultural products that were supposed to be purchased haven't happened. There's and the tensions have rised, even in the face of all this. So had he done nothing, we probably would be in a better position with China than we are now, because, we've inflamed the situation and gotten nothing positive out of it.
Right.
Yeah, it's
so it'll be fascinating to watch the approach Biden takes.
Yeah.
But he's just gonna have to rip at Trump for a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to attack what little record there is, and the fact that, for me, the huge part of this is that the Republican Party didn't come out with a platform, that they've sold their soul. I mean, so for me, the fact that, I have conservatives telling me, well, Trump's really not conservative and he's not really a Republican. We don't really know what he is. But to have the party just go, yeah, we're going to sit this one out. That's a huge sign for me.
Well, sure it is. And, I know some of the Republicans have got the Lincoln Project and they're spending money against Trump. I fully understand that. And McCain families come out against him, and Colin Powell and John Kasich, and I understand that. But in itself, it's not going to be enough, because a lot of Republicans are still absolutely going to be down the line loyal to him, no matter who comes out against him.
No, I mean, that's the scary part in this. So, it's your thought, and because I actually agree that he will get something out of a bump out of this, even though the ratings, which has got to drive Trump crazy, the ratings for this convention were less than the Democrats got. In fact, his acceptance speech, I think like 2 million fewer people viewed Trump's speech than Biden's. That's got to be driving him crazy. But you think there's going to be not a big one, but something of a bump coming out for the Republicans?
I think 2 or 3. Normally he should come out with 8 or 9, but I think 2 or 3. It's not going to be big, but in this race, every vote's going to count. And the Biden campaign, before the debates, during the debates, after the debates, they also, I know there's a big country here, but they also have to focus on the key states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Florida. They've got to focus on the key states, and they have to do their platform there, and they have to drive it home, especially with working class people. They have to convince them that they are absolutely going to be better, because Trump pulled those workers. And even if the promises have fallen short, there's still a lot of workers that have told me, he didn't do all, but how much better is Biden going to be for me? He's going to cater to other people. He's not going to cater to the working class. I mean, he's got to drive that home in those key states and others.
No, that's an excellent point, because it is part of the message that they're sending. We may not have done anything, but he'll do worse. So don't vote for him.
Right.
And that was the message that I got out of the speech. It wasn't, hey, look how great I am. It was how bad he's going to be.
Sure.
Which, I guess for some that works. Now, the big speech was done on the, I guess, the south lawn of the White House, right?
Right.
Has that ever happened before? I mean, has a presidential candidate, an incumbent, used facilities like that in the past?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Now, I don't think it's the end of the world, take your breath away thing. Members of Congress, I ran for office. We used the Capitol as a backdrop, pictures and on the steps and things like that. However, I mean, this was definitely a use of federal property, with campaign people, et cetera.
Right.
Nothing's going to happen. I would beg, if I was a Democratic consultant, I would beg no Democrat, please do not file an ethics thing. Just don't do it. It won't be decided in time, et cetera. Like I said, I don't think it's the end of the world thing, but it's not something that is correct to do.
Right. No, I mean, as I said to you the other day, on my list of grievances with this administration, this is far down the list. But for me, it does show how, as Ivanka said, he has changed Washington, and I agree with her. He has changed the culture there, and precedent. Long-standing tradition doesn't matter. Whatever dear leader wants, dear leader gets. And this is just, in my view, one of those little things that, the history be damned.
Well, Rick, they set the tone day one because when he came into the White House, if he was going to bring a family in there to officially work in there, they should have then firewalled themselves from the business. He didn't do it.
Right.
I expected some really horrible things to come out of it because, frankly, I was very critical of Hillary Clinton. They had the Clinton Foundation. She was Secretary of State, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Well, this was on steroids because you had the kids in the White House doing policy and they're running a business, right? And nothing happened. To me, that was the Achilles heel. Now, after the election, New York State may make something happen out of it.
Yeah, which is why everyone, all of my lefty friends are saying this is why he's going to cheat to be reelected, so he doesn't have to go to jail for 4 more years. I'm going, yeah, but who's in prison, us or him?
Yeah, it's right.
So last night, I'm sure you saw the end of the event, which I got to be honest, as you were looking at the crowd, very few people wearing masks. Some were saying this could potentially be a super spreader event. Then you mix those folks in with all the protesters. I mean, we're just not learning the lessons of social distancing. We're not doing this well, Bob.
Well, we aren't. And I was in a town the other day where I literally was laughed at when I went in the store and I had a mask on. 2 people laughed at me. They laughed at me, and I'm like, what end of Ohio am I on?
Yeah.
It's just, it depends where you go and who does what. I mean, for the most part, people follow some of the rules, but you're right. When it comes to certain events or the protests or whatever, it's just a different world.
No, I mean, it's very, very crazy to me. But I'm sure you saw some of the pushing and the video out there of, Republicans wanting to pretend like they were accosted. And I point to the Rand Paul video where he tweeted out that he was accosted. And they're going, one, and maybe you can speak to this, one, why in the hell are you walking through a protest with your wife? Why would you subject her to that kind of a situation where she could be potentially harmed? And 2, why didn't you have someone drive you? Why didn't you have someone pick you up? There's got to be a way that in the White House they could have a shuttle of limousines, because I'm sure very few of those people drive their own cars. There's got to be a way to make sure that the limousines come and pick them up.
First thing I thought when I saw this, the first thing is, why was he walking? He was walking for something to happen.
Right.
Now, most likely he knew he wasn't going to get, really hurt because there was a lot of police, but he was walking for something to happen. And you don't walk from these events. And yes, I've left the White House many, many times, Rick. Yes, you can leave in a car with absolutely no problems. And when there's protests, my son and I were in New York City when he was younger. They had some protests at the Republican convention, and we had the taxis come into the hotel driveway. We didn't walk to the curb to get them, because you don't do that when there's protesters. Not that we thought that they would beat us up, but you don't want to go through it, right?
Right. Well, I mean,
and he walked on purpose.
Right. No, and that was him. I saw that, and there was another one. Representative Mast was out there, and he was looking. I think he was looking for trouble as well.
Sure.
But it's just one of these things. Why would you subject yourself to that inflamed situation? Look, if you want to sit down and have a conversation, I'm all in favor of that. But interjecting yourself into these hot moments, and I point to this kid from Illinois who showed up in Kenosha with a gun. Why would you put yourself in that moment of heated tension where your presence is only going to ramp that up even further?
Right. I mean, if the protesters had just left Rand Paul alone, it would have given him no publicity. He probably would have actually maybe made some faces at them. I mean, it would have given him no publicity. But it's the heat of the moment. You're going to yell stuff, and then he's going to react the way he did. And, he helped the officer, et cetera. I've seen it. It's been all over Twitter. It's been all over the news. And but again, nobody walks through protesters leaving the White House. You don't do it.
But here's the thing. Here's where I'll end this. Is the good thing is to the credit of the people who were there protesting, no one did anything stupid, so they didn't get that. See, look, they had to use someone being bumped as a look. This is an attack. No, that's a wave of humanity pushing people around, who just happened to bump into a cop who happened to bump into him. That wasn't an assault. Completely different.
Yeah.
Just my view.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, the policeman didn't go after them,
But I got to tell
assault,
you, when I looked at it, I thought the cop was going to until Rand Paul said something to him. And I'd love to know what he said to him.
I think he said, "Are you all right?"
Is that what it was?
I think so.
Okay, because
that's what somebody told me. I don't know if that's accurate.
It looked to me like the cop with the bike. He got pushed and he didn't know where it came from, and he got up with a look like he was ready to fight. But this is now the world we live in. Sad reality.
Sure is.
Anyway, Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Have a great weekend. Our good friend Bob Ney. And look, again, I go back to that moment where and good on the people there in Washington for not taking the bait. Because when I saw Rand Paul walking through this, I'm going, there's no question this guy is looking for trouble. There's no question in my mind that he specifically walked out in the middle of that crowd because I can, and to show how tough he is. Hoping that someone would do something stupid, because look, he was surrounded by cops, and I'm sure there were a couple more trailing. That kind of arrogance, that kind of stupidity, to me is dangerous. And these are the kind of people who are leading our country, I would argue, down the absolute wrong path. Because, they're going to take a situation that's already inflamed and they're going to throw gasoline on the fire, to use that analogy. They're going to make it worse in the hopes that they can then crack down. Because at their core, these are authoritarians. These are people who believe in the iron fist and we're going to dominate, so that they can send in, the weapons of war, the tanks, the goodbye gun, all of the crowd control measures that they got to toy with in Iraq and Afghanistan. All of the thing that it's like a laser beam that if they hit you with it, you feel like you're on fire. It's a microwave beam. They've got one that like a array of things that makes you almost throw up. It sends your body into convulsions. They've got sound cannons. They've got all kinds of little toys that they are just fantasizing about using on we Americans when we get out of line. And look, you can be angry at the protesters, the people who are out there saying that, yes, Black lives do matter. And that, yes, we're going to do something about it. We're not going to allow this to happen anymore. But why would you continually pick and inflame? Unless you want cities to burn, unless you want looting and chaos, and you want this stuff to happen. Because, I said this, a while ago. The only way Trump gets to re-election is if he can scare enough of us into believing that he's the protector. At the end of the day, it's that bottom layer of Maslow's hierarchy. It's the bottom. It's safety and security. And that's what Republicans have always played for. And we're just living through another one of those moments. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1963. That was the day one of the most important stands for justice and equality took place in United States history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech to 250,000 people in Washington, D.C. But did you know that one of the main organizers for the march was a man by the name of Bayard Rustin? Rustin is often left out of the history books because he was gay and because of his earlier communist affiliations. He was born in 1912 and raised in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He was raised in the Quaker tradition, and his commitment to peaceful, nonviolent protest continued into the civil rights movement. Rustin joined the Young Communist League in the 1930s, a time when communist organizers were some of the few people actively speaking out about racial injustice in the United States. After he left the Young Communist League, Rustin spent a brief time as an organizer for a march on Washington, D.C. planned in the 1940s. This movement was led by one A. Philip Randolph. The planned march was aimed at putting pressure on President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to desegregate work at industries with federal wartime manufacturing contracts. When President Roosevelt agreed to issue an order desegregating these jobs, the planned march was called off. But the idea for the march lived on and became a reality during the civil rights movement. Rustin went on to work in the labor movement. He became the founder and first director of the AFL-CIO's A. Philip Randolph Institute, which focuses on tearing down the walls of discrimination in workplaces and within the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, again, I look at this event in the White House. I look at the super spreader event. Potentially, look, you got, what was it, 2,000 people on the South Lawn, none of them wearing masks. All of them, decided to descend into the protests. And they've got this mixing of, thousands of people. At a moment where you just don't, I just don't get why we don't learn, especially if you had the choice not to be a part of this. But here's the scary part. Evidently, here in the U.S., we just confirmed the first case of reinfection, because we used to believe, hey, you got it, you're immune to it, and then you can go out and you can super spread all you want. That seemed to be the rational thought. That's what the rationale was. We could get it, we would live through it. It wouldn't be bad, especially if we were young and healthy, and then we move on because we're going to build an immunity. Evidently, a Reno, Nevada man, 25-year-old guy, evidently got it in April. Mild symptoms, made it to the other side. And then I guess in May, tested positive again. And the reason they're saying that this is two separate infections, and what are you doing that you've been infected twice, that you got it once and then you went out, what the hell, I'll get it again. Other than you're just being stupid. But evidently the second time he got it, much more severe, much more difficult to get over. And what they're saying is the reason that they they know it's a second infection and a different infection, is that this is another genetic strain that it's changing. So, you know, the argument now is, and the concern is that even if Trump is right, and that all these companies are racing to come up with the vaccine, and there are a bunch of them out there, they're racing to get a vaccine together. They're racing to get the very lucrative government contracts. And Trump has promised it will be ready by the end of the year. So, you know, safety precautions be damned, testing be damned. We're just going to get something that we can say is a vaccine. What they're saying is, even if we do get a vaccine, there's a possibility it's not going to work. There's a possibility that, you know, the virus is mutating and moving on, and we could still be hit by it. So they're saying, look, you know, just because you've got the antibodies doesn't mean you're immune from getting it again. And this is, again, one of those really scary moments where we have no leadership right now. You know, Trump is stuck on sloganeering. And, you know, you look at the countries that have done this well. They're countries that, you know, the people were, for the most part, on board. They were, you know, smarter. You look at some of the Asian countries. I mean, you could say it's the China virus. China gave it to us. Okay, yeah, it came from China. It did. This one did. But had we followed what they did, because they seem to be past it. Their economy seems to be turning around a little bit. We're still in this weird moment. And this is where, you know, maybe one of the weaknesses of our quote-unquote freedom is that we're stupid. Don't know. And sadly, this has shown a huge, huge gaping weakness. You know, we used to be the ones that were immune from this stuff because we did the right things. We had people in places of power and positions of authority and the head of institutions who, well, didn't kowtow to political pressure at every turn because we didn't have a bully in the White House saying, hey, you know, I want you to change those guidelines. We need to test less. And then you find out we're going to start testing less. It's very, very scary times. And I guess we have to learn. I guess my grandfather was right. You know, people have to learn always the hard way. And this is sadly where we are. But like I said earlier, I think it's going to be interesting to see if this speech was a super spreader event, and how many of those fearless Republicans who showed up for the big speech will be infected. How many Herman Cains will there be? Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.